Henry Lawson was 79 years old, a former Marine. He had served during the Vietnam War. Time had drawn deep lines across his face, and his back no longer stood as straight as it once did in uniform. He walked with a cane now, the result of an old injury that never truly healed. But behind his tired eyes was a quiet strength, and in his chest still beat the heart of a man who had once marched through foreign jungles for a country he loved. These days, Henry lived alone in a weathered apartment at the end of Oak Ridge Street. It was small, just a single bedroom, and a kitchenette with an old coffee maker that made more noise than coffee. But it was enough. The apartment was filled with memories, a few framed photos of him in uniform, a worn-out recliner, and shelves lined with paperback novels and war medals. He didn't have much, but he had his dignity. And more importantly, he had Emily. Emily was his only granddaughter, the light of his life. She had his eyes and her mother's bright smile. Every time she visited, the apartment came alive. She would hop up on his lap, ask him stories about the olden days, and giggle when he spoke in his old drill sergeant voice. Those moments were what Henry lived for now. Her birthday was coming up, 8 years old already. Henry remembered the first time he held her, tiny and wrapped in a pink blanket, and now she was almost tall enough to reach the kitchen counter. He didn't have money for big gifts or toys like other grandparents. His military pension barely covered rent and medication, but he had been saving for weeks. Pennies, dimes, whatever he could spare from his modest grocery trips. He skipped his favorite peanut butter, walked instead of taking the bus, and drank instant coffee to cut costs. All for one thing, a birthday cake. Not just any cake, though. A small, round chocolate cake with pink icing and Happy Birthday Emily written on top. He'd seen it before through the bakery window. Town Sweet Bakery, just a few blocks from his apartment. Every time he passed it on his morning walks, he would stop for a moment and look inside. The cakes were always so beautiful, lined up like little treasures. Henry always told himself, "One day, I'll get one for Emily." That day had finally come. He rose early that morning, carefully folding the few dollar bills and coins into an old cotton handkerchief. He added a coupon he found weeks ago, 15% off any birthday cake. Every bit helped. He shaved, dressed in his cleanest flannel shirt, pulled on his coat, and made his way out the door. The walk wasn't easy. His joints ached in the early spring chill, and the cane tapped steadily along the pavement. But Henry moved with quiet purpose. He even stopped to pick a small flower blooming near a fence, just in case Emily liked it. When he reached the bakery, it was already busy. The glass front showed a bustling Saturday crowd, parents with kids, couples sipping coffee, and bakery staff moving quickly behind the counter. Henry took a deep breath and pushed the door open, greeted by the warm scent of vanilla and cinnamon. He stood near the entrance for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. The line was long, but he didn't mind. He had time. Slowly, carefully, he joined into the line and began the patient wait. His eyes wandered to the display case, and there it was, the cake. The same one. Small, round, covered in soft pink icing, with sugar butterflies sitting gently on top. It was perfect. As the line moved forward, Henry fumbled gently in his coat for the handkerchief. His fingers were stiff from the cold, but he found the bundle of change and the coupon tucked safely inside. He held it tightly in one hand while the other gripped his cane. His mind wandered as he waited. He thought about the look on Emily's face when she saw the cake. He imagined her smile, the way she clapped her hands when she was excited. He could already hear her voice. "Grandpa, did you get this just for me?" And he would nod, maybe pretend to be grumpy, but she'd know he was proud. Every person in front of him was another step closer to that moment. Henry didn't notice the look some younger customers gave him, looks of impatience, annoyance, perhaps even pity. He was lost in something deeper. This wasn't just a cake. It was love, wrapped in sugar and chocolate. When he was just 2 people away from the counter, he checked his money again, counting silently. He had enough, just barely, and the coupon made it possible. The woman in front of him stepped aside. It was finally his turn. Then, suddenly, a voice behind him. "Move it, old man. Some of us have places to be." Henry turned slightly. A tall young man in designer jeans and a leather jacket was standing behind him with his arm around a woman in flashy sunglasses. She rolled her eyes and said, "Seriously, he's been holding up the line forever." Henry blinked. "I'm next," he said gently. "Just need one cake." The young man snorted. "What? You gonna pay with pennies? You even have enough money, Grandpa?" The girl giggled cruelly. Maybe he's hoping for a veteran's discount. People in the bakery looked on. Some glanced away. Others watched quietly. No one said anything. Henry swallowed hard. He didn't want trouble. "Just give me a moment, please," he said, his voice calm, almost pleading. The man shoved past him. But Henry didn't let go of the counter. "I'm just trying to buy a birthday cake," he said again. The woman at the register looked nervous. The line behind them grew silent. The young man scoffed, shoved Henry's shoulder, and in a heartbeat, the old man stumbled backward. His cane hit the floor. His handkerchief flew open, scattering coins across the tile floor like marbles. The coupon fluttered under a display case. Henry landed on one knee. The pain shot up his leg, sharp and immediate, but he didn't cry out. He didn't speak. He only looked down at the coins. A little girl in line pointed at him. "Mommy, that man fell," and still no one moved. The bakery had gone quiet, but not for the right reasons. In the middle of a warm bakery filled with sugary smells and weekend smiles, a 79-year-old veteran lay on the ground, surrounded by his life's savings and silence. And somewhere outside, just down the street, a different kind of silence was about to be broken. Henry Lawson was finally at the front of the line. He had waited nearly 30 minutes, leaning slightly on his cane, shifting his weight when his joints began to ache, and smiling softly each time someone caught his eye. His mind was on his granddaughter, Emily. Just a few more steps, and he'd have the cake, her birthday cake. But just as he opened his mouth to speak to the young woman at the counter, something sharp broke through the gentle moment. A voice behind him, loud, cutting, full of arrogance. "Step back, old man. You smell like mothballs." Henry turned, startled. A young man, tall, overdressed, reeking of expensive cologne and entitlement, was standing behind him, his arm slung casually around a woman in tight jeans and oversized sunglasses. The girl laughed as she blew a bubble with her gum and popped it with her tongue. Henry blinked, unsure whether to ignore the insult or respond. He spoke quietly, almost with embarrassment. "I'm just here to buy a cake for my granddaughter." The girl scoffed. "What's a broke old guy like you doing buying cake? Shouldn't you be eating canned soup or something?" The words stung, not because they were new. Henry had known the sting of poverty and judgment for years, but because they came so easily, so cruelly, and in public, in front of strangers, in front of a room full of people who said nothing. Henry didn't move. He stood tall, at least as tall as he could with his worn-out knees and fading posture. "It's my granddaughter's birthday," he said again, his voice trembling but clear. "I've been saving." "Saving?" the young man sneered. "With what?" "Your retirement pennies." Then, without warning, he shoved Henry aside, not roughly, not with a full push, but enough. Enough for a man who was no longer steady. Enough to knock him off balance. Henry's cane slipped out from under him, his handkerchief the one holding his carefully folded coupon, and all his coins fell to the floor. The contents scattered. Pennies clinked on tile. A single dollar bill fluttered near the counter. The coupon slid under a display of wedding cookies. The bakery fell completely silent. Henry fell to one knee, instinctively curling to protect his side as pain shot through his hip. His hand reached out, not for the coins, but for the cane, which lay just out of reach. His had an old Marine Corps ball cap, had tilted off his head, and now lay face down on the floor. The girl giggled again. He fell. "Guess he's too old to stand without government support," the young man said, kicking a penny toward the register like a piece of trash. No one moved. Not the cashier. Not the couple near the coffee machine. Not even the woman with a stroller near the door. One or two people turned away. A few pulled out their phones, quietly filming, unsure whether it was to help or for clicks. But no one spoke. No one offered a hand. Henry didn't cry. He didn't speak. He only gathered his breath and tried to rise, but his knees betrayed him. He leaned heavily on one palm, his other hand trembling as it reached for the cane. The young man stepped closer, towering above him. Maybe next time, let someone with money go first. Then unthinkably he nudged Henry with the toe of his sneaker. Not a kick, not violent, but demeaning, deliberate. The girl whispered, "Let's go, babe. This place stinks." And still no one helped. Henry, still on the ground, slowly gathered the change. His fingers shook as he tried to collect the coins, many of which had rolled beyond his reach. A tiny silver quarter spun in place, as if mocking the situation. He looked up at the cashier, a girl barely out of high school. Her eyes were wide. Her hands froze above the register. She looked at the manager, standing at the back, but he only shook his head. Henry forced a breath into his lungs. His ribs hurt from the fall, but more than that his pride was bruised. Not because he had been knocked down, but because no one cared that he had fallen. And it wasn't the first time. Not really. Not in this country. Henry had seen friends die for a flag that many no longer respected. He had returned from war to find protesters spitting at uniforms. He had lived quietly for decades, asking for nothing, offering only his gratitude. He had raised a daughter, and now he was helping raise a granddaughter. And here, on the tiled floor of a bright, cheerful bakery, with pink cakes and jazz music playing overhead, Henry realized something heartbreaking. In this moment, he was invisible, not just ignored, dismissed. He closed his eyes for a moment, not to pray, not to curse, just to remember something better. Boots in formation, the sound of the bugle, the way his captain had once saluted him after a long march, the faces of brothers in arms who never got to come home. He opened his eyes and reached for the cane again, still out of reach. A child's voice broke the silence. "Mommy, that man is crying." Henry wasn't crying, but his eyes were wet, not with pain, with memory. Another voice, from the back. "Isn't anyone going to help him?" Someone coughed. Another stepped slightly to the side, but still no one acted. And then the door chimed. A breeze entered the bakery as the door opened slowly, and with it came the soft clink of polished boots on tile. A figure stepped inside, broad shoulders, military posture, wearing a dress uniform that hadn't aged a day. He looked around the bakery, then down at the man on the floor. "Sir," he said firmly, loudly, "is your name Henry Lawson?" Henry looked up, surprised. "Yes." Another figure followed, then another. 3 in total. All veterans. One older, with silver hair and a chest full of medals. One with a prosthetic leg. One in fatigues, recently retired. "We're your brothers," said the man in front. "You served with my father. He told me to find you." Henry didn't speak. "We saw the video," the soldier said. "We came right away." The girl with the sunglasses gasped. The young man who had shoved Henry stepped back, suddenly smaller. The first soldier bent down and picked up Henry's cane. Then, gently, he extended a hand. Henry hesitated, then took it. With effort, Henry stood, not alone but lifted, supported, restored. The bakery, silent a moment ago, remained still. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, from outside, came more footsteps. 2 uniformed officers stood near the bakery door. Not police. Military. Watching. The manager stepped forward, stuttering. I didn't know he was a veteran. The older veteran who had entered last turned to him. You don't need to know someone's past to treat them with decency. The cashier whispered, "I'm sorry, sir." Henry only nodded. The soldier reached into his own pocket and laid a $100 bill on the counter. "Give this man whatever cake he came for." The cashier, eyes still wide, nodded. "Yes, sir. Right away." She turned and gently placed a pink cake in a box, the one with the butterfly. She wrote the name Emily on it, just as Henry had imagined. Then she slid it across the counter, hands shaking. Henry took the box, his cane, and a deep breath. He looked at the young man who had shoved him. The boy didn't meet his eyes. His arms had dropped from the girl's shoulders. He looked like a child now, afraid, exposed. Henry didn't need to say anything. He turned to leave, flanked by 3 men who knew what sacrifice looked like, who knew what brotherhood meant, who remembered a time when dignity mattered more than money, more than noise. As they exited, someone clapped, then another, and another, not thunderous, not performative, just quiet, respectful applause that followed Henry out the door like a second shadow. The bakery door burst open with sharp ding, cutting through the stunned silence like a bugle call on a battlefield. A tall man stepped inside, his presence commanding, unmistakable in his crisp Marine Corps dress blues. The bars on his chest caught the light. His posture was so upright, so immovable, that time itself seemed to pause. 3 more followed close behind. One walked with a rigid arm, his other sleeve empty. A purple heart glinted from his chest like a sacred relic. Another, older, his hair more gray than black, moved with quiet strength, bearing a chest full of medals earned over decades. The last was younger, barely 30, but the fire in his eyes held the weight of wars past. He didn't come for ceremony. He came for his own. The tall Marine scanned the room. His voice was low, steady, and full of meaning. "Is your name Henry Lawson?" Still on the floor, Henry lifted his chin. His hand clutched the side of the counter for balance. He gave a small, humble smile, despite the pain in his ribs. "Yes," he said softly. "He used to be sergeant." The man stepped forward and saluted, not out of formality, but respect. "We're your brothers." The young Marine knelt beside Henry, gently gathering the fallen wallet, the crumpled handkerchief, and the last coin still spinning near his foot. Then he extended his arm and said what no one else in the room had said until now. "You're not alone, Sergeant. Not today. Not ever." He helped Henry to his feet, slow and sure, like lifting a flag back up the pole after the storm. Outside, the low hum of diesel engines rolled in like distant thunder. 2 military vehicles parked curbside, olive green, the kind you didn't expect to see on Main Street bakery corners. Their presence was unmistakable. This was no ordinary visit. Behind them, 2 local police cars had pulled in. Officers stepped out, but did not enter. Their hands were behind their backs, eyes alert, but not intrusive. This was no longer just a case of an old man assaulted in a cake shop. This had become something else. The couple who had started it all, the man with the expensive jacket, the girl with her gum and sunglasses, were suddenly smaller than they had ever appeared. Their swagger had vanished. Even the bakery's pastel-colored walls seemed to close in on them. "You're coming with us," one of the officers said. The girl stammered, "We didn't mean—" But the words fell flat. They were escorted out quietly, without cuffs, without fuss, just silence. That was punishment enough. Inside, no one had moved. The cashier's hands were still trembling. The manager had gone pale. Even the child who'd earlier pointed out Henry's tears stood frozen, now gripping her mother's leg. Then the baker, an older woman with white flour dusting her apron, emerged from behind the counter. Her cheeks were damp, her hands steady. In them, she held a cake. It wasn't just any cake. It was the best in the store. White frosting swirled with pink. Carefully piped butterflies danced across the top. And in bold, elegant script were the words, "Happy birthday, Emily, from Grandpa." The baker didn't say anything as she handed it to Henry. Her lip trembled. She nodded once and stepped back. Henry took the box slowly, like he was holding something holy. His fingers lingered on the edges. No one spoke. Then, from the back of the room, a single clap echoed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. Just deliberate. One beat after another. Another joined. Then another. Soon, the bakery was filled not with noise, but with quiet applause. The kind that rises not from excitement, but reverence. It wasn't for drama. It wasn't because the camera was rolling. It was because something sacred had just been restored. A man's dignity. Henry didn't cry, but his eyes were wet. Not from pain, not even from gratitude, but from something deeper, a recognition that he was seen, not as a burden, not as some relic, but as a man who had once stood for something greater than himself, and who still carried that weight with grace. He looked at the soldiers. The one with the missing arm saluted him. The one with the medals placed a hand on his shoulder. The youngest gave a small nod as if to say, "We've got you now." Henry turned to leave. As he stepped toward the door, the Marine who had helped him spoke again, not to Henry, but to the room. Some people think honor dies with age. That memory fades. That sacrifice becomes irrelevant when it's no longer convenient. He paused. His gaze was steady. But we don't forget, and we don't leave our own behind. And then, just before Henry reached the exit, the young soldier said it. Sergeant Lawson stood so he could walk free. He bled so others didn't have to. All he wanted was a cake for his granddaughter. And what did he get? He looked at the crowd. Laughter. Silence. A phone camera. No one argued. No one defended themselves. Because he was right. The silence that followed wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was realization. Henry stepped into the sunlight. The cake held firmly in one hand, his cane in the other. The military vehicles didn't leave. They waited like sentinels. Like proof. Outside, a few neighbors had gathered. A mailman stopped on the sidewalk. A boy paused his bike. No one asked questions. They only stood, watching. Henry turned toward home. The walk was slow, but it didn't matter. Every step was steady. Every breath was full. He had come to buy a cake. He left with something else entirely. Behind him, the door of the bakery slowly closed. But the silence it left behind would echo for a long, long time. Because sometimes the strongest sounds are the ones that remind us of who we really are. And that day, an old soldier reminded a whole town what honor still looks like. If your heart paused when that old soldier stood back up, if you've ever thought of someone who quietly sacrificed so you could live free, then please subscribe to Old Soldier Story, where real stories and the memories that should never be forgotten are shared with deep respect. Don't forget to like the video so that the spirit of honor and courage can reach more hearts. And if you have a grandfather, a father, or a friend who once wore the uniform, share their story in the comments. We want to hear from you. Old Soldier Story, where honor never grows old. United States.